The night sky was burning when the human research ship tore through the atmosphere of an unknown world. Metal screamed, alarms blared, and the ship's body split apart like paper in fire. Inside, chaos ruled, crew members shouting, systems failing, oxygen leaking into the dark void. But in the end, only one human survived the fall. Her name was Lena, and when she opened her eyes, silence greeted her. She lay on a broken floor of twisted steel and shattered glass, her lungs pulling thin air into her chest. The crash site stretched like a graveyard, smoking fires rising into the alien sky. Her arms trembled as she pulled herself free from the wreck, coughing blood around her. The planet loomed, an endless jungle of black trees and glowing plants, strange creatures calling from deep inside. She knew she was alive, but she also knew she was trapped. Her oxygen tank was half broken, hissing precious air into the atmosphere. She slapped at the valve, trying to save what little she could. Panic throbbed in her chest, louder than the strange animal cries. Her training told her one truth: alone. Without food, water, or air, she would not survive. The forest seemed to watch her, its leaves moving though no wind blew. Eyes gleamed in the shadows, too many to count. Predators circled the crash site. Drawn by smoke and blood, their growls shook the ground. Their teeth glinted like knives. Lena staggered back, heart hammering. Her legs weak from injury, she reached for a shard of metal, anything to defend herself, but her hands shook. She whispered to herself, "Not like this. I can't die like this." Then the growl stopped, replaced by a new sound. Heavy footsteps echoed, slow and deliberate from the tree line. Something massive emerged. It was not beast, not machine, but warrior. The figure stood taller than any human, its body carved with muscle. Armor made of bone and metal wrapped its chest, marked with scars of battle. A long spear rested in its hand, the tip glowing faintly with energy. Its face was fierce, sharp ridges on the brow, burning yellow eyes staring straight at her. Lena froze, unable to move. The predators in the jungle hissed, backing away at the sight of the warrior. It was clear they feared him. The alien stepped closer, his presence filling the clearing. He looked down at Lena, tilting his head as though studying prey, but instead of striking her down, he turned toward the beasts. With a roar that shook the trees, he thrust his spear. The jungle exploded with chaos as the predators scattered. Squealing into the shadows, the alien did not chase them. He simply stood guard, silent and unshaken. Lena's knees buckled, relief and fear mixing in her chest. Her savior was also her greatest threat. The alien's gaze returned to her. Heavy and unblinking, he stepped close enough for her to see the scars across his skin, the symbols carved into his armor. His voice rumbled deep and broken, like thunder forced into words. "Survival," he growled, "means you belong to me now." Lena's breath caught. The words were clear, the meaning darker than she wanted to accept. She tried to back away, but her body had no strength left. The alien crouched, bringing his glowing eyes level with hers. There was no kindness in them, only demand, only claim. Her mind screamed at her to run, but her body stayed frozen. The jungle around her whispered with strange noises. The night pressed closer, the fires of the crash dying into ash. She looked into his eyes and saw something beyond possession, something primal. This world was his, survival was his law, and now she was bound to that law, whether she liked it or not. Her fate had been sealed the moment he saved her. The alien rose to his full height again, towering above her. He extended a hand, massive and scarred, waiting. She hesitated, every instinct warning her not to touch him. But the forest growled again, eyes blinking back into the shadows. She knew the truth. Without him, she was nothing but prey. Her hand shook as she reached for his, and as his rough grip closed around her wrist, she felt the weight of chains, invisible but unbreakable. The night belonged to predators, but so did the day, and now she was caught between two choices: to walk into the dark alone and die, or to follow the alien warrior and live. Her heart pounded as he pulled her forward into the jungle. Her last glance at the wreck of her ship told her all she needed to know. Her old life had ended in fire. Her new one had just begun in chains. The jungle swallowed Lena as the alien pulled her deeper into its heart. His grip was firm, unbreakable. His stride long and steady, every shadow seemed alive. Glowing eyes flickering between trees, but none dared step near. The predators knew better than to challenge him. Lena stumbled, her legs weak, yet the alien never slowed. She felt like a prisoner dragged into the unknown. Yet part of her understood, without him she would already be dead. After hours of walking, they reached the mouth of a vast cave carved into the side of a black mountain. The air inside was cold, damp but safer than the burning wreck behind. The alien released her wrist at last, his yellow eyes still fixed on her. He pointed to the ground, a command without words. She sat trembling, exhausted, her body aching from bruises and fear. The alien warrior set his spear against the wall, then moved to a pile of bones and stones with a few skilled motions. He sparked fire into life. The glow filled the cave, revealing scars across his chest and arms. Lines of battles fought and survived. Lena's heart pounded, unsure if she was safe or in more danger than before. The firelight flickered across his face, highlighting ridges and sharp lines that made him look more beast than man. Yet there was intelligence in his stare, something sharp, unyielding. He finally spoke, his voice deep and broken. Struggling with human words, "You live because of me," he growled. "You breathe because I choose," she swallowed, her voice shaking. "Why? Why save me?" The alien leaned closer, his hot breath brushing her skin. "Survival means you are mine." The words froze her blood. It was not kindness, not pity, but claim to him. Saving her life was not a gift, it was a bargain. She wanted to scream, to tell him she belonged to no one. But the jungle outside howled with hungry voices. Her eyes darted to the cave entrance where shadows prowled, waiting for a chance. If she walked out now, she would not last an hour. The alien knew it, and so did she. He moved to the fire, pulling a hunk of strange meat from a leather pack. The flesh hissed as he roasted it over flames, the smell sharp but edible when it was done. He tore a piece off with clawed hands and tossed it toward her. "Eat," he commanded. Her stomach twisted with hunger, and despite fear she obeyed. The taste was bitter, unfamiliar, but it filled the emptiness inside her. He watched her eat with satisfaction, like a hunter taming prey. Silence stretched until she gathered courage to speak. What do you want from me?" The alien's eyes burned in the firelight. "Mate," he answered simply. Her breath caught, the word heavy, final. She shook her head, whispering, "No, I can't." But his gaze never shifted, never softened. "Then, you die." Her chest tightened, tears threatening. She was trapped between death outside and possession inside. The cave echoed with roars as predators gathered, their voices hungry. The alien stood, towering over her. His spear back in hand, he walked to the entrance. His silhouette outlined against firelight. The beast's eyes blinked in the dark, their growls rumbling like thunder. The alien roared back louder, fiercer. The sound shaking stone, the predators hesitated, then slowly retreated, fading into the jungle. He stood guard long after, never blinking, never resting. Lena wrapped her arms around herself, shivering though the fire burned bright. Her mind raced with fear and confusion. This alien was not gentle, not kind, but he was strong. Strong enough to keep her alive in a world that wanted her dead. She hated the thought, but survival whispered the truth. She needed him. Her pulse quickened as she realized his demand was not about love. Not about comfort, it was about control. About survival through submission. Yet in his eyes there was something else, something she could not name. It was not only hunger, it was recognition, as if fate itself had tied them together. The night stretched long, filled with echoes of the wild. The alien never sat, never rested, his shadow looming near the entrance like a guardian statue. Lena tried to close her eyes, but her thoughts twisted. Every breath reminded her she was alive only because he chose it. Her hands shook as she whispered to herself, "What am I becoming?" The fire cracked, the cave whispered with silence, and the alien's voice rumbled once more. "You stay, you live, you fight, with me." He turned his gaze back to her, fierce and unblinking. "Survival means you are mine," he repeated. The words like chains, and as the night deepened, Lena realized her world of freedom had ended. Now she lived under his claim, and there was no escape. The first light of dawn spilled across the alien sky, casting the jungle in shades of green fire and blue mist. Lena woke to the sound of low growls echoing in the distance, the cries of unseen creatures hunting through the morning haze. Her body ached, her mind still heavy from fear and exhaustion. The alien warrior stood at the cave entrance, tall and unmoving, his spear planted firmly beside him.
He had not slept, not even once.
His yellow eyes watching both the jungle and her with equal intensity. When he finally turned, his expression remained unreadable. "Up," he ordered. His voice graveled deep. She hesitated, but his stare pulled her to her feet. The warrior tossed her a piece of dried alien meat, tougher than leather but edible. She chewed slowly, the taste sour, her stomach turning yet demanding food. When she was finished, he motioned for her to follow. Confusion crossed her face. "Where?" she asked softly. The alien's lips curled in something that was not quite a smile. "To live," he growled. "You learn." The jungle was alive in the morning, every shadow whispering of danger. Strange insects the size of her hand crawled across glowing roots, their legs clicking like knives. Bird-like creatures with reptile wings circled above, their cries sharp enough to rattle her bones. Lena's fear grew with every step, yet the alien walked calmly, spear ready. He moved like he was part of the forest, every motion careful, every sense alert. She tried to copy him, but every snapped twig and broken leaf under her feet felt like a scream announcing her presence. He stopped suddenly, crouching low, his hand shot out, pulling her down with surprising gentleness through the bushes. A predator prowled, its body long and lean, covered in dark scales. Its mouth dripping venom, it sniffed the air, its tongue tasting the wind. Searching for prey, Lena's breath caught, her heart slamming against her chest. The alien raised his spear but did not strike. Instead, he whispered in his broken tongue. "Watch." The beast crept closer, muscles rippling, its tail slicing the air. Then with a blur of motion, the alien hurled a stone. It struck the ground far to the side, the noise drawing the predator's attention. The creature hissed, lunging toward the sound. Vanishing into the trees, the alien stood tall again, his expression fierce. "You live." By learning, he said, not only fight, but think. Hours passed as he taught her. Which plants were safe, which ones burned like acid. How to mark a path without drawing predators. How to hear the difference between the jungle's natural calls and the silence that meant death was near. At first she stumbled, her hands cut by thorns, her clothes torn by vines, but slowly, she began to see the patterns he already knew. She realized the forest was not random. It had rules. Deadly rules, but rules all the same. When the sun reached high above the trees, he brought her to a river. Its waters ran fast and green, but the banks swarmed with insect swarms large enough to strip flesh. He showed her how to smear mud across her skin to block their scent. The insects buzzed near her but did not bite. For the first time, she felt a spark of control. Her eyes lifted to him almost in thanks, but his gaze was cold. Unyielding. To him, this was no kindness, only necessity. "You live, you mate," he repeated, as if reminding her of the cost. That night back at the cave, Lena collapsed near the fire, her body trembling from exhaustion. The alien set the meat to cook. Silent as always, she watched him, the firelight glowing across his scars. They were not random marks. Each scar told of battles, of survival against odds she could not imagine. And suddenly she understood he was not just teaching her to survive. He was testing her, shaping her, pushing her toward something she had not yet agreed to be. Her thoughts twisted in fear and defiance. She wanted to scream at him, to tell him she would never be his, but her stomach turned at the memory of the predator's venomous teeth, the insect's buzzing wings, the forest's endless dangers. Without him, she would be dead before dawn. And deep inside, a darker truth whispered. Part of her wanted the strength he offered. Part of her wanted to survive no matter the cost. The alien sat beside the fire, his voice low, almost like a growl in his throat. "My people," he said slowly, "would kill you. Not protect." His eyes burned into hers. "I keep you alive. Because you are mine." Lena clenched her fists, torn between rage and helplessness. The cave filled with silence, the fire crackling, the jungle roaring outside. But inside her heart, something began to shift. Fear was no longer the only force now. Survival itself whispered a dangerous thought. If she could learn his ways, if she could endure his demands, she might not only live, she might grow strong enough to fight him, strong enough to turn the bond against him. She lay down near the fire, her eyes heavy with exhaustion, but the words lingered in her mind like chains she could not break. "Survival means you are mine," he had said. Yet another voice inside her whispered back, "Survival means I will become more than prey." The cave had become Lena's prison and her shelter. Every night the alien warrior stood guard, his spear glowing faintly in the firelight. Every day he dragged her into the jungle to test her, to sharpen her senses against dangers she could barely face. But on the fourth night the jungle grew quiet, too quiet. Even the beasts with glowing eyes held back, watching from the shadows but refusing to move closer. Lena sensed the change before she saw it. The alien's body stiffened, his nostrils flaring as though he had caught a scent carried on the wind. He turned, his yellow eyes narrowing. "Stay," he growled. The word sharp and heavy. Her stomach twisted, fear creeping into her bones. If the predators had not scared him, what could make him this tense? The sound came soon after, distant footsteps. Heavy, deliberate, not the soft pads of beasts, but the march of warriors. Lena's breath caught. Panic tightening her chest, he grabbed her by the arm. Pulling her deeper into the cave, his grip was rough but protective, guiding her into the darkness behind the fire's glow. There he pushed her behind a wall of stone, hidden from view but close enough to see the cave entrance. "Silent," he warned, his voice low. Moments later, shadows filled the cave mouth. 3 figures stepped inside, larger even than her alien protector, their armor sharper, their weapons gleaming with strange energy. Their faces bore the same ridges, the same burning eyes, but their movements carried arrogance. They laughed, their voices cruel, echoing against the stone. One sneered, pointing at the fire. "Exile hides here," he said in their native tongue. The words rough, but Lena understood enough to feel the danger. The alien warrior stood tall, his spear in hand. His body was scarred and weary, but his stance was unbroken. The intruders circled, mocking him. "You guard prey," one said, sniffing the air. "Human prey." Their laughter was sharp like blades. Lena pressed a hand over her mouth to stay silent. Her heart hammering, her alien protector did not flinch. He lowered his spear just enough to show calm, but his voice rumbled. "She is mine." The words lit sparks of anger in the others. "Yours?" One spat. "Weak exile claims what should be consumed." The largest stepped forward, his weapon humming with power. "You shame our kind," he snarled. "We take the human. We take your head." The fight came like a storm. The exile roared, his spear flashing in arcs of light. The intruder struck with brutal force, blades clashing, sparks flying. The cave shook with the sound of combat, stone chipping beneath their blows. Lena crouched low, fear clawing at her, but her eyes refused to look away. The exile moved with fury, every scar on his body a lesson written in battle, but he was outnumbered, forced back step by step. His enemies laughed even as blood splattered the stone. He struck one down with a spear thrust, the body collapsing in a pool of dark blood, but the other 2 pressed harder, driving him to his knees. His growl turned into a roar, desperate and wild. Lena's hands trembled, her mind screaming at her to stay hidden. But as she saw him stagger, his chest bleeding, his strength failing, something inside her shifted. This was not only about his survival. If he died, she would be next. Without him, the jungle, the warriors, the world itself would devour her. She grabbed a broken shard of metal from the ground, her body shaking. Fear and courage twisted together as she stepped from the shadows. Her voice cracked but carried through the cave. "Leave him!" The warriors' heads snapped toward her, their eyes blazing with hunger and rage. In that heartbeat of distraction, the exile surged forward. His spear pierced one through the chest, the scream rattling the cave walls. Blood sprayed across stone as the warrior collapsed. Lifeless, the last intruder snarled, rage twisting his face. But the exile met him with one final strike, driving the spear through his throat. The cave fell silent except for the heavy breaths of the victor. The alien staggered, his body shaking, blood dripping from wounds across his chest and arms. He fell to one knee, his spear clattering against stone. Lena rushed to him, dropping the shard, her hands reaching for his shoulders. "Don't," she whispered. "Don't die." His eyes lifted to hers, glowing but fading in that moment. He was not the monster who had claimed her, not the warrior who had chained her fate. He was broken, bleeding, and vulnerable. His lips moved, the word escaping like a ghost. "Mate!" The sound of it chilled her, yet it also bound her. She realized then that his demand was not only about power, it was about survival, about something deeper than possession. If he died, her chances of life died with him. Her chest tightened, her breath quickening as she pressed her hands to his wounds. She had no skill, no tools, but she would not let him fall. The fire cracked. The dead warriors lay scattered, and the exile bled beneath her touch. The jungle outside roared, sensing weakness, waiting for its chance. Lena's hands shook, her mind racing. This was the test she never expected, not the jungle, not the predators, but the choice. If she saved him, she sealed herself to his fate. If she let him die, she sealed herself to death. Her heart pounded, her lips trembling as she whispered to herself, "Survival means becoming what he wants." The cave smelled of blood and smoke, the bodies of fallen warriors lying silent on the stone. Lena's hands were stained red as she pressed them against the exile's wounds. Desperate to slow the bleeding, his breaths came heavy, his chest rising and falling like a storm barely held back. He should have been dead already, yet his glowing eyes still burned faintly, refusing to close. Every moment he clung to life felt like a demand upon her, a reminder that his survival was tied to her choice. She tore strips of cloth from her ruined jumpsuit. Wrapping them tight around his chest, her fingers trembled, her throat tight. She had never treated wounds like this, never faced the weight of another's life in her hands. The firelight flickered across his scars, old battles etched into flesh beside new ones she had watched him earn. As she worked, his hand rose weakly, gripping her wrist with surprising strength. His lips parted, his voice low, almost broken. "Mate," he whispered again. The word no longer sounded like a claim, but like a plea. Lena froze, her heart pounding. She wanted to resist, to shout that she was no one's possession. But the truth pressed heavier than pride. Without him, she would have died a dozen times over. Without her, he might not see another dawn. The bond between them was forming not by choice, but by survival. Through the night, she tended him, feeding the fire, cleaning his wounds, keeping predators from daring the entrance. She clutched a shard of stone in one hand, ready to defend if shadows drew closer. Every sound outside the cave reminded her of the fragile balance of life here. Her alien protector was fierce, powerful, but not unbreakable. Seeing him bleeding, struggling, stripped the illusion of invincibility. And in that weakness, she saw something else, something human. The thought unsettled her more than his threats ever had. At dawn, his breathing steadied, his strength returning slowly. When his eyes opened again, they found hers at once. She sat beside him, exhausted, her body aching, yet she could not look away. He studied her face as if committing it to memory. "You fight," he said, his words heavy with effort. "You not pray. You learn." For the first time, his tone carried something different. Not demand, not command, but respect. The day passed slowly. With his wounds binding him to the cave, the burden fell on her, for food, for water, for survival. Lena's chest tightened with dread as she stepped alone into the jungle. Every sound made her flinch. Every movement in the shadows reminded her she was prey. Yet she remembered his lessons. The mud smeared on her skin, the way to walk silently, the way to think before acting. When a predator slithered near, its fangs dripping venom, she did not scream. Instead, she threw a stone to the side just as he had taught her. The beast lunged after the noise, leaving her alive. Her legs shook as she ran back with handfuls of fruit and roots, her heart thundering. When she returned, he was waiting, watching, his expression unreadable, but his eyes sharper than ever. "You hunt," he said, his chest rising with pride and pain. "You live." That night, when the fire burned low, Lena drifted to uneasy sleep, but dreams came, strange and vivid. She saw flashes of his life, not through words, but through vision, an alien child cast out by his tribe, beaten for defying their law, a warrior standing against his own kind to protect another human. Blood, exile, loneliness, years carved in scars and silence. She woke with a gasp, sweat beading on her forehead. Her eyes flew to him, lying wounded but awake, his gaze steady on her. "You see?" he growled softly, his voice more breath than sound. The bond was real, an unspoken link tying their minds in moments of weakness. Her chest tightened, confusion battling fear. If the visions were true, she was not the first human he had tried to protect. And for that he had been punished, banished. Left to survive alone, the thought unsettled her, even stirred something like pity. But pity was dangerous. Pity was a chain just as strong as fear. She shook her head, whispering to herself, I can't belong to him." Yet her hands reached again to his wounds, her body moving against her words. Because without him, the jungle would devour her, and without her he might never rise again. The silence stretched, broken only by the crackle of fire and the low rumble of his breath. Lena's eyes burned with exhaustion, her body trembling, but her mind refused to rest. She told herself she was saving him for herself, for her own survival, but deep inside, she knew it was more than that. The bond was growing. Unspoken, unwanted, yet undeniable. And as the night deepened, one truth echoed louder than all others. In this world, survival was not just about strength, not just about fear, it was about connection, about binding lives together even against will. Her fate and his were tied now not by choice but by blood, by fire, and by something she could not name. The fire had burned low. Filling the cave with flickering shadows, Lena sat with her knees pulled close, her eyes fixed on the alien warrior lying across from her. His wounds were healing, his strength returning, but his eyes never left her. She felt the weight of his stare like chains, heavy and unbreakable. Every heartbeat reminded her of the truth. She was alive only because of him. At dawn he stood, slow but steady, his chest wrapped in cloth she had tied. He gripped his spear, testing his strength, his muscles tense beneath scarred skin. When he spoke, his words were sharp, heavy with meaning. "You live now," he growled, "but alone. You die." Her throat tightened. "I can survive," she whispered, her voice trembling. His eyes narrowed, glowing in the dim light. "Survive means more." He stepped closer, his presence filling the space around her. "You fight, you hunt, you learn," he said. "But still, pray unless bond." The word struck her like a blade. Bond, she shook her head, her chest rising with anger and fear. "You want control," she said bitterly. "You don't care about me." The alien's jaw tightened, his voice rumbling like thunder. "I care. For survival," he growled. "Yours. And mine." The jungle outside erupted with noise. The cries of predators and the rumble of something larger. The alien moved to the cave mouth. Scanning the shadows, Lena followed, fear prickling across her skin. Through the trees, a massive shape shifted, branches snapping beneath its weight. It was no ordinary beast, but something far greater. A monster that ruled the forest. Taller than trees, its hide armored, its maw glowing with venom. The ground shook with every step it took. Lena's heart raced, her breath catching. "What is that?" she whispered. The alien's face hardened, his grip tight on his spear. "Death," he answered simply. The beast's roar shook the mountain, scattering birds and driving lesser predators into hiding. The exile warrior turned to Lena, his gaze fierce, his words heavy. "Fight alone, you die," he said. "Fight with me. We live." Her chest tightened as she realized what he meant. The bond he spoke of was not only about possession. It was about strength, about power shared between two lives. But to accept it meant surrender. It meant becoming his in ways she had resisted since the crash. Lena's mind twisted in conflict. She remembered the night he claimed her, the nights he guarded her, the battles he fought for her. She remembered his word, mate, spoken not as threat but as plea. Was survival worth giving up the last piece of herself that was free? Her hands shook as she whispered, "I don't want this." His voice was firm, unbending. "Want or not, choice is same." The roar of the beast outside shook the cave again. The ground trembling, dust fell from the stone above them, a warning that time was running out. Her eyes locked with his. In them she saw scars, rage, loneliness, and something deeper. Not kindness, not gentleness, but a bond forged in fire and blood. She hated it, feared it, but she also needed it without him. She was prey with him. She was something more. Her heart pounded as she realized the truth. The choice was not about freedom, it was about survival. He reached for her, his massive hand open. Waiting, she stared at it, trembling, every instinct screaming to refuse, but the beast outside roared again, its shadow stretching long across the forest. Her breath quickened, her body shaking. Slowly, against every thought, against every fear, she placed her hand in his. The moment their skin touched, heat surged through her, her vision blurred. Her heartbeat doubled, the bond sparked, not just flesh to flesh, but mind to mind. Images flooded her head. His battles, his exile, his loneliness, his refusal to hand over a human once before, her own pain, her crash, her fear of death. The bond tied them together, threads of survival twisting into one. She gasped, staggering, but his grip held her steady. "You see now," he growled softly, "together. Strong." The ground shook again, the beast drawing nearer, its roar deafening. The alien warrior released her hand only to lift his spear. He stood taller than before, his strength renewed by the bond, and though Lena trembled, though fear aided her, she felt something stir inside her, a strength not her own. For the first time since the crash, she did not feel completely human. She felt part of something greater. The alien turned to her, his eyes burning like fire. "Tomorrow," he said. "We fight as one," his words carved into her soul. Heavy, unshakable, she clenched her fists, her body still trembling. Her heart whispered the truth she had tried to deny. Survival no longer meant resisting him. It meant becoming his mate, his equal, his bond. The roar of the beast split the night once more, promising death if they failed. And as the fire burned low, Lena realized there was no turning back. Her fate was sealed, her choice made. Survival meant surrender, and together, they would face the storm. The night bled into dawn. The jungle alive with whispers of fear. Even the predators stayed hidden, their glowing eyes avoiding the path of the monster that ruled them all. Lena stood at the cave entrance, her body trembling, her heart pounding. Beside her, the alien warrior gripped his spear, his wounds half healed but his strength burning brighter than before. The bond between them pulsed like fire in her veins, strange and terrifying, yet it filled her with a power she had never known. The ground shook as the beast approached, each step cracking branches and shaking stone. Its massive body broke through the tree line, armored plates gleaming with slime, venom dripping from jaws wide enough to swallow a human whole. Its roar split the sky, echoing like thunder across the forest. Lena's knees buckled, terror clawing at her chest. But then she felt him, the warrior's presence inside her mind. Steady, unshaken. His voice rumbled low, not in her ears, but inside her thoughts. Stand. She stood, breath uneven, gripping a shard of stone she had sharpened into a blade. The alien spear glowed faintly. Charged with strange energy, he stepped forward, fearless, his chest rising with a growl. Together, he said, his eyes burning. Or die alone. The beast lunged, its claws ripping into stone. Its roar deafening, the warrior met it head-on, spear striking against armored hide, sparks flying in the dawn light. Lena's mind screamed at her to run, but the bond pushed her forward. She darted to the side, her heart racing. Searching for weakness, the monster turned, its tail whipping through the air like a blade. She ducked, barely escaping death, the force slamming into stone and shattering it. Her chest heaved, fear and adrenaline flooding her, but the warrior's roar pulled her back to focus. Eyes, he growled through the bond, and she understood. The beast reared, its head towering high, jaws glowing with venom. Lena scrambled up a fallen tree, climbing higher than she thought possible. Her arms burned, her breath sharp, but she leapt onto the creature's back. Her blade stabbed between armored plates, sinking into softer flesh beneath. The monster shrieked, twisting, trying to throw her off. The alien warrior lunged forward, driving his spear into its chest. The two strikes together made the beast stumble, its roar shaking the mountain, but it was not finished. It turned, its claws slashing across the warrior's side. Blood sprang, he staggered but did not fall, his eyes glowing brighter, his voice thunderous in her mind. Again, he commanded. Lena gritted her teeth, pulling her blade free, stabbing again and again into the gaps of armor. The monster thrashed, smashing trees, stone, even shaking the cave behind them. But every strike they made was shared through the bond. She could feel his strength guiding her, and he could feel her courage feeding him. Together they fought like one when she faltered. His will lifted her when he stumbled. Her resolve steadied him. The beast roared one final time, lunging with venom dripping like fire. The warrior planted his feet, his spear glowing with furious light, with Lena's voice screaming in his mind. He drove the weapon deep into the monster's throat. The roar turned into a gurgle, its massive body collapsing, the ground trembling beneath the weight. The jungle fell silent, every creature bowing to the new rulers of survival. Lena collapsed to her knees, her chest heaving, sweat and blood mixing on her skin. The bond still burned inside her, fierce and unyielding. The alien warrior stood over the fallen beast, blood covering him but victory blazing in his eyes. He turned to her, his gaze heavy, his voice a growl of triumph. Together? He said again. We live. She stared at him, her breath ragged, her body trembling. The truth was clear, undeniable. She had survived because of him, and he because of her. As the sun rose over the jungle, shadows moved in the distance. Other warriors of his kind, drawn by the roar of the fallen beast, approached cautiously. They stopped at the sight of the exile standing victorious, his spear dripping with the monster's blood, and at his side a human woman standing unbroken, her eyes fierce. For a moment silence ruled, then slowly, the warriors lowered their weapons, bowing their heads in respect, not mocking, not laughing. The exile was no longer only an outcast. He was a conqueror, and she was his mate. Lena's heart twisted. Torn between pride and dread, she had wanted freedom. But freedom no longer existed in this world. Instead, survival had given her something else. Strength, purpose, and a bond she could not escape. Her old life was gone, her future bound to the warrior beside her. Yet as she looked into his eyes, Glowing with fire and something deeper, she whispered to herself, maybe survival was never about losing. Maybe it was about becoming. The jungle roared in the distance. But no beast dared draw near. The bond burned strong. The warrior at her side unshaken. Together they had defied death. Together they had conquered. And together, they would face whatever came next. For in this world, survival no longer meant running, it meant fighting, claiming, and rising as more than prey, it meant becoming his mate. Not in chains, but in fire, in blood, in unbreakable bond.